Hey guys, we're going to chat with George. We're going to do a little impromptu chat on the First Amendment. We hope our guest candidate Cindy Stormer can join us next time. She had a personal something abrupt happen. We hope she's okay. But Cindy, we'd love to have you back on whenever you're available. So George and I are going to just do a little chat about the First Amendment. It's kind of in the news nationally. George Assange is in the middle of fighting extradition to the United States, and the U.S. Justice Department has filed some really serious criminal charges, espionage, I guess, basically, and there's a lot of First Amendment kind of issues at stake, and I would kind of argue that it's not a good look for the United States to be extraditing someone simply for exercising their First Amendment rights as press in this particular instance, and so we'll kind of talk about that, and the continual violations of First Amendment rights in family courts, whether it's because judges are not allowing cameras in courtrooms, or because judges are monitoring social media stuff that we do, and then you go to court and you find out that the judge has been watching your social media. Hey Kevin, appreciate everything you're doing. And then often we find ourselves kind of facing a malicious judge who gets mad that we're exercising our First Amendment right, which is a real fundamental right. And it's worth revisiting why that's important to a functioning democratic society. Last week we had on the shoe, if I remember right, on, and one thing he did was when I talked to him, he's running for Baca Bennett's court, and he told me, because we chatted on the phone before, he doesn't really care, what people say, on social media. He has kind of a nice adult approach to it, which is, it's not my concern what people say on social media about me. When I go there, if I'm elected judge, I'm going to just look at the facts of the case. And I think that's a good approach. Be the adult in the room. We have a right to say what we want.
Hey,
and
are you there?
Yeah, George, I hear you.
Yeah, I was having problems with this microphone, but give me 1 second. I'm
Okay.
setting up, but go ahead. We can start.
Yeah, so we're gonna, here, George, at least, we're just doing like an impromptu chat, on the First Amendment, and we'll hopefully have a guest lined up again, for the next time. But, what was kind of getting me thinking about this, I had a personal incident just today where, one of my, the publications that I used to write for, did some things that I felt were not, ethical, I'll just say. And I've been, kind of just discussing that, privately with other people. And then I find out today that my editor is fishing around trying to find out who I'm talking to. And he's saying that anything I say about the publication is potential libel. And the insinuation there is that they're going to sue me for, communicating things that I thought were unethical that were going on. And my first reaction, was in those situations, which is an attack on the First Amendment. Should I, stop talking about this thing that really bothered me? And then I got really upset because, again, people in the writing profession, they should be the first ones to understand, the importance of freedom of speech. And here they are, going after, one of their former writers. I have every right to communicate to people about, things that I've observed that I thought were unethical, as long as you're not lying, as long as you're not doing things in a way that are purely meant to be malicious. If you're just communicating your thoughts on something, factually, that should never be something you're afraid of. And people shouldn't go after you for those kinds of actions. I was thinking, the First Amendment, explicitly mentions the word press, and it's so far removed, centuries ago. I don't have a historic understanding what the press meant back then, but I think that, when the founding fathers added protections for the press, I don't think they were adding protections for restaurant reviews. I don't think they were codifying, protections for entertainment, kind of thing. I think they really understood that, there's a role for news journalism, and that, I think it's not just a right; it's a mandate for people in the press to take their job seriously and to be aggressive, and to not be scared, and to speak up for people who are marginalized. Last night I was at a bar, and I met a father, and he thanked me. He watched these videos that I do with George and other things, and he's having a really hard time in family court. And he just said, what you guys are doing is really at the core of, of that profession. You're speaking up for people who either are too afraid to speak up, or maybe they don't have a platform to do so. But he just, thanked me for doing that. And that happens quite a bit. I have those conversations quite a bit. And, another thing that he appreciated was the fact that we don't, sugarcoat, what's going on specifically, with the family court system that is so just in the business of making money, if we're really trying to nail it down. But last week, George and I had a good conversation with On Lee Shu, and I think he said a lot of things that at least sounded really on par with the values that George and I and a lot of you guys have. Check your request. All right, George. We'll try to get you on here. Let me see. Trying to get George to join us. Sorry. But one thing that he said, again, is that he's not worried about what people say on social media, and I think that's important, that people don't use that against you. But too many times in family courts, they'll kind of look at you and what you're saying. And I had Jesse Navarez threaten me because of what I was saying and writing about. And there's now a complaint before the judicial commission on judicial misconduct. Sorry, I'm trying to. George, I'm not getting an alert. Okay, let me try again. All right, sorry. Should be coming on. All right, George. Well, why don't you take over?
There you go.
I've already kind of gotten the conversation started, talking about, Julian Assange and, my personal experience at work, kind of workplace retaliation, where they're, trying to make you feel comfortable about talking about unethical things you see. This all comes down to First Amendment rights. So, what's been your experience, and what are some of the points you want to make?
Real quick, I mean, we need to start asking ourselves, is our First Amendment right being restricted, and are we being retaliated against when we start speaking up about these issues? And it's concerning to me, right? Because in my instances in Harris County, and the things that I'm seeing out of Harris County, is that if you say anything going against any sort of judge, you're going to be retaliated against. And not just my case, but I've seen Kyle French's case. I've seen others come to me and tell me that these judges are flagrantly just disregarding the fundamental basics of our Constitution and the First Amendment, right to free speech and press. And as you know, there was a member of the press that was threatened with arrest for going to watch the Kyle French trials. The judge actually said, you have 5 seconds to leave or I'm going to arrest you. Our free speech, everybody has an opinion, and everybody screams, I have free speech. I can say it, my free speech this. But then once you offend somebody with an objectable view of their opinion, right, now you're harassing, now you're and that's one of the things my judge said. Well, you can talk about me on Facebook all you want, as long as it's nice. And she doesn't realize, my judge, the 309th judge, Linda Dunson, what she doesn't realize is that she pandered to voters, constituents, to earn that seat. And if you don't know the basic fundamentals of the Constitution, your First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third, Fourth, Fifth, all the way 14th, whatever it goes up to, right? if you don't know that fundamentals, then how are you restricting the public from coming into their own courtroom?
Yeah.
Taxpayer, and not just that, but it's our right to ensure that our government is working the way it should be.
So she has a fundamental misunderstanding of why the First Amendment was written the way it was, and all these judges do. I think they've been in that world for so long that they think that there are protections for them, and it's not. It's our protections against them oppressing us, right? We're the ones that are getting protected from the government. They're not the ones that get to protect themselves from the citizens. They got it ass backwards, if I can say. And there was a video you sent of a Texas Supreme Court justice, telling people it's okay to criticize us, but only do it, in terms of how we interpret the law. So again, he misses the whole point too. We're free to criticize you for anything. Once you've accepted an elected or appointed position, it's fair game. Don't restrict us. Don't put up guardrails on how we can criticize your role. You've chosen that job, and so stop complaining.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I say they pander to these voters. They go out there, they door knock, they say, please vote for me. They buy all these signs. And what gets me really, really irritated, I mean, it's just a pet peeve of mine, is when these people that are looking for that judicial seat come and they say, we want to instill justice back into our courts.
Mm-hmm.
Then they revert back to the old ways, and that's what we're seeing in the 280th court, the protective order court out of Harris County. Judge Barbara Stalder, she ruled with an iron fist in that court, and there was men and women that were having lifetime protective orders cast upon them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know for a fact, Kyle French and I talked to Diane Kirby when she was running and she was campaigning, talking about how she was going to bring justice and people needed to be treated properly. And then now I'm hearing from several people in Harris County, people like these judges in Harris County don't know that the people that talk to me, the members, or I've had to become press. I've had to become a journalist. I've had to record my
mm-hmm.
observations and create patterns and come up with my own story. And I feel that I'm free to do that under the First Amendment.
You are. And, let's talk about the idea of what does the press mean? There was a really interesting conversation on NPR yesterday. They had someone from university talking about Julian Assange. So he's an example of someone who would fall into the press, but a little bit more broadly, the citizen journalist as opposed to the establishment. But his point was that he absolutely has all the rights and privileges of formal press. I would agree. I would say, people disagree on that. I don't like the idea that there are gatekeepers, that only people who are part of the Associated Press are the press. I think how you conduct yourself, if you conduct yourself with certain values and with certain goals, then you're a journalist, right? It's about your intentions and your work ethic and your ethics. And Julian Assange is, he's not a perfect character in the sense that he didn't follow, all the protocols that a journalist would. We might redact names, or at least read the documents before we release them. But broadly speaking, he was acting in that capacity of uncovering embarrassing information and releasing it to the public. So it's a fundamental role. And right now he's facing extradition, to the United States. And there are so many things that are a danger that can chip away at the First Amendment. And so, using, the Justice Department, to intimidate people is one example. I think you mentioned harassment. I've been charged with harassment, and I've, spent 3 years facing those charges. And there's a real argument to be made that that's a violation of the First Amendment. At what point is your free speech harassment? I think when we criminalize free speech, that's very dangerous. Protective orders, are another thing that kind of erodes, if it's not used right, erodes our First Amendment rights. So we have to be aware.
Yeah, one of the things you're saying is a harassment, and I've been charged
Yeah, I
with
remember.
harassment. Believe
Yeah, yeah.
it.
Yeah,
And I was just talking about people that stole from me.
yeah.
I made a complaint, and so what I've researched and some of the things that I have found are that it's your First Amendment to be able to file a criminal complaint. Somebody comes and they steal a pot off your porch, and you know who it is, and you have probable cause, you're able to file that criminal complaint. And here we are, we have court orders for interference with child custody. We show up and we're looking just for some sort of accountability from somebody, and nobody wants to hold those court orders accountable. But if it's a writ of attachment, a writ of a habeas, same piece of paper, black ink, written by a judge, they'll enforce that order. Even with these orders saying that law enforcement may use reasonable efforts to enforce that order, and now we, the parents, are being retaliated against law enforcement, saying you come back here and ask for your kids again on your day, they're gonna file harassment on you. So they won't enforce the felony, but they'll enforce harassment on you for you having that First Amendment right to make that police report, because you have judicial orders to see your child. You have a right to see your child. I mean, I tell this to people all the time. I didn't make these rules. I wasn't a frame builder of the Constitution. I wasn't a founding father. I'm just doing what y'all told me to do in school, right? Everybody told me in school, I am covered by the United States Constitution. You have the First Amendment right here. You have the Second Amendment right here. And they've laid it all out for me. The basic fundamental baseline for the legal system. And now you're threatening me if I blow the whistle?
Yeah, it's amazing how misused. I mean, the people I know who've had harassment charges, it's used, for retaliation. It's used often for powerful families if they want to criminalize someone's action. It's always misused. Another area, the founding courts interact with the First Amendment. It's supervised visitation, and T. Matthew Phillips, there were 2 points to his lawsuit in California, but one of them, the big one was the fit parent, right? You can't separate a fit parent from a child. That's a huge one. But number 2, he's going after them for First Amendment violations based on supervised visitation. We have a right, and he could explain this, based on the case law. I don't know all the background, but the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that we have a right to speak to our children without being impeded upon, right? That's a freedom of speech to talk to our children without somebody watching us, right? So
and I agree with that. One of the cases that I've been looking at is the Second Amendment, and whether you agree with it or not, the Second Amendment, they came out and they said that a protective order violates your Second Amendment right to arm your home for defense. So if a protective order violates your Second Amendment right, does a protective order violate your First Amendment right? Does it violate your fundamental right to your child? Because you can hold a gun, right, to protect yourself, but your liberty, your property, they're violating with that same protective order. So the protective order and the guns is going all the way up to the Supreme Court.
Was that a family court case or criminal?
I don't remember. I think they heard it in Pennsylvania, and now it's going to that was the appeals court, and so now it's going to the Supreme Court. But that's my problem with Harris County and a lot of these judges all over. It's just they don't know the basic fundamentals.
Yeah.
And if they do know the basic fundamentals and they're just violently wielding their discretion around, now that's oppressive. That's oppressive. You are dealing with someone else's family, another child, someone else's offspring, someone else's is work. You know, if and another topic I want to get into is, how are these judges, when they make these rulings, how does it affect these parents? I know successful parents that have lost everything. They've lost retirements, they've lost houses, they've lost cars, they've lost relationships with their children. And these judges are laughing all the way to the bank. The amicus, the therapist, everybody's making money, and John Doe has lost everything he's working for. And now he's speaking out. There was a lot of us that were financially and prospering until we had a breakup, and then now family court has taken everything, and now they're telling you, shut up, don't say anything, and if you do, we're gonna hit you harder.
It's interesting, like how that dynamic plays out, and again, that's why speech is so important. You know, what happened today with my former employer, it's very unsettling to see somebody try to put pressure on you to not voice unethical things that you've seen. But that happens, that happens throughout, the court system, and it just happens at so many levels. And, I just think we have to always fight back. And it can be really easy just to take, I don't know if it's easy, but, they want us to take the route of giving up and not doing what we're doing literally right now. Because it really irritates them. There's a cognitive dissonance, in the heads of these judges when they realize they're intelligent people like you and me having, articulate conversations about why these judges are scumbags.
And I say it all the time in a lot of our videos is, if a judge is willingly denying you, oppressing you, keeping you from your child because they're making a backdoor deal, they're having ex parte communications, they don't like you, they have a sorority brother or sister that's coming in that's going to plead a case before them, and they're making these rulings, and they're willingly denying you, saying you need to take this to the appeals court if you want to overturn my decision. Those people need to be removed off the bench ASAP, because that's oppressive. And when I say the word oppressive, every time I say it, I'm thinking about slavery. Because for so long, we oppressed Black people. We've said, and so let's talk about reparations. The state knows. The state knows. The Supreme Court knows their family courts are in shambles. The appeals court is backlogged because all these degenerate judges are just throwing these trash cases. And some of these parents like you and I that are having these articulate conversations are doing research. We live in 2024. We all have an iPad. We all have internet access at the public library, wherever. We can look up the civil rules of procedure. We can look up the rules in which they're supposed to be abiding by. And when we see that they're not abiding by these rules, what do? They're going to retaliate. We're going to shut you down. We're going to shut you up. So yes, when judges are willfully and willing denying you or oppressing you, that's a crime. And if you know what you're doing, that's even a bigger crime, because you know what you're doing. And if you're dumb and you don't know what you're doing, you don't need to be on that bench. And I hate to be so flagrant about it, but they're flagrant with denying us those simple rules that are in the law books. And again, a lot of people hired lawyers in 1860, 1900 because the literacy rate was so low. They didn't know how to read or write, and they didn't understand their rights. We're in 2024, we can have all of that written, read to us with AI. So there's no reason why this should still be happening.
And just last week, we heard from a candidate that Baca Bennett signed a TRO with no affidavit. I mean, it's bad enough that they allow these frivolous, bullshit affidavits, but now she doesn't even need any affidavit.
Yeah, a clear violation of due process, right? Again, goes back to the fundamentals. If you don't know the fundamentals, you shouldn't be on that seat, Judge. And these lawyers that see this action and don't report it, I mean, you're just as bad. And I hate to say it, and I know you don't want to go against your boss or a district court judge, But in order for our judicial system to work correctly,
Mm-hmm.
we need people to follow the rules. You will never seek, or you will never find justice if you keep allowing people to perjure themselves in court without admonishment.
What?
You will never find justice if you allow lawyers to continually make statements of fact they know is untrue. You're letting the opposition
Mm-hmm.
get away with simple violations of the Texas Lawyers Creed, the disciplinary rules of professional conduct, and then you're violating your judicial canon when you don't step in and say something.
And he's, on these shoes last week said, I forget what he said, bad or whatever. But basically, bad judges create lazy lawyers. Is that what he says? Something like that. Like, and so that's another danger. These attorneys in Harris and Tarrant County and family courts are getting lazy because it's more about personal favors than procedure and following the law.
And I smile at that because you're absolutely correct. So a lot of this stuff is cookie cutter. A lot of family law is cookie cutter. They all come from templates, and depending what kind of attorney you have, some attorneys actually go over their motions, right, to make sure that everything is properly done and said and corrected, right, because they're just templates. But since everything is cookie cutter, it's all templates. These lazy lawyers, they just file whatever. I have a notice of non-suit, and that's another story, from Carolyn Robertson, and the certificate of service is from like 8 months before she served it. She didn't go in and she didn't make those corrections on her template, and he's right. These lawyers are getting lazy. And what are we doing as parents, pro se advocates? We are finding the loopholes in the law because we know we can't go this route because this person is lying on the record. So what do? We go back to their rules, right? And we look at the Texas Lawyers Creed, we look at the disciplinary rules, and we say, hey, guess what? This is online now. I looked up on a phone and it says lawyers can't make statements of fact that they know are untrue. So then we start spreading it. We assemble in these Facebook groups. We come together, we unite at the Capitol, and we say, hey, we see a whole bunch of lawyers making statements of fact that they know are untrue, and these judges are failing to admonish. Now, at that point, I want to report that because that's a crime. Perjury is a crime in Texas. You are not immune from criminal prosecution because you're a judge or a lawyer. They can absolutely oppress you. And when they oppress you, they don't follow their rules, the laws, their creed, their rules from the state bar, then they're not acting in that judicial capacity. They're not operating in a judicial hearing. So why do I even want to do business with the courts if you're going to allow people to lie without admonishment? What do we go into the court and say, you swear in for? Promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And then what's the formality of that? Why do we have Secretary of State oaths of office? Why is it so important that these judges have to put that oath of office saying they'll obey the state laws and the Constitution to their best of their ability? Why does that have to be filed with the state if there's no significance to it? There is a significance to it.
It puts them on notice that they're going to be held accountable if they break that. You can't say you didn't know, you took the oath, right? I mean.
So, and one of the Supreme Court things I saw, and this was talking about immigration, is when people come into the United States and they swear in because they are being sworn in as a American citizen, those people swear to the laws and the Constitution of the United States to become a citizen. So before you become a citizen, you have to swear that, hey, I know the laws and the Constitution, and I'm going to follow them to the best of my ability. Will they get arrested afterwards? Absolutely. So can judges. Judges are not immune from criminal prosecution.
It's an important point. I want to read an email. This is a little off topic, but I never got around to sending you a synopsis of this. This is an email, because just talking about judicial misconduct, there's so much that we get hit with every day, we kind of lose track. So I'm going to just kind of read this, and then maybe we can kind of wrap it up, George. Sorry, I got to get going, and we're going to try to get Cindy Stormer back on the show. She had a little urgent matter today, but Speaking of judicial misconduct, this deals with our region in North Texas. I'm not going to say who sent this, but he's a very smart government watchdog who I've used as a source many times, incredibly brilliant person. And this is an email. It's, public record because it's going to the Office of Court Administration. So I don't mind reading it. All right. So you'll understand what this is as I get started here. Recent email. I'm forwarding you a copy of the email I just received from the Secretary of State, which shows they have no oath of office on file for David L. Evans for assigning himself to court benches in the 8th Administrative Region since 6/29/22. Yet he has submitted pay vouchers to the Texas Comptroller and has received monies for self-assignments for the listed date. These payments are above his annual salary as the presiding judge of the 8th Administrative Judicial Region and in violation of Article 16, Section 40, Section 33 of the state constitution. The 88th Texas legislature amended Section 602.0073 of Texas Code, requiring all judges appointed under Chapter 74 to file their oath with the Secretary of State. I have already brought to your attention the Office of Court Administration documentation shows Judge David Evans was not eligible for senior status when he sent his letter to Justice Nathan Heck, because at the time he was not a retired judge as defined by Chapter 75, Section 75.001 of the Texas Government Code. As of the sending of this email, I've now received a response from the Office of Court Administration on the issue of Judge Evans's authority as the administrative judge of the 8th Administrative Judicial Region. Even those actions in this position have federal implications under the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment. So, again, several violations there. He's double dipping. He's holding 2 offices of emolument. He botched his application to be a senior judge, meaning he shouldn't be a senior. I'm going to say he's not a senior judge because there's no room for error on these kinds of things. He's not a senior judge. He's been moonlighting as a senior judge, and he has no oath of office for any of his work. This is the guy overseeing our region. He's either incredibly incompetent or willfully treating this, as a criminal enterprise.
Okay, so let's examine this and let's just think logically. How long has he been a judge?
Well, he's old. So he had a career as an active judge, and now he's a senior judge, supposedly.
Let's just say 30, 40 years, whatever.
Easily.
I'm almost positive he had to do an oath of office when he first became a judge.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if you're not following up with that, it's just like firemen and police and attorneys. They all have CLE hours. If he's a judge, he still has to maintain his attorney status. He still has to entertain CLEs, continuing legal education, right? And after 40 years, you still don't know, like, I got to submit in my oath of office before I take a bench. Like, you don't remember that?
And also just the timing of, the way you get appointed as a senior judge, if you do it right, it's very specific. You can't do it while you're active. Right. It has to be done within a certain window of time. You only have a narrow window of time. It has to happen in a very specific way, but it's also not that hard because if you read the directions, you just follow them. And he botched that. And so, my big thing is that if you're 1 day late filing statute of limitation, do they give you any leeway?
Or certificate of service?
Anything.
Right.
They are black and white. There's no gray. And there's no mercy. But when these judges screw up, and they screw up epically all the time, they just pretend like nothing happened. And even right now, this gentleman's saying, I've not heard back from the Office of Court. They're just ignoring him. Yeah, they're just like, la, 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 la.
And I say this all the time too, and I think it needs to be said more often. These judges and these lawyers, they use the Constitution and the laws as their shield and sword.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Hey, the Constitution says this, we have to do it. It's just like them saying right now, hey, the government code and the Constitution says these are the rules he has to follow, right? But if we say, hey, we want to look into all of his complaints over at the state bar grievance, oh no, no, the government code says we can't break that law. We can't touch that law. That forbids us to turn over the grievance or the investigation or anything.
Yeah.
Well then, okay, well let me use my constitutional right. How come David Evans gets to use the Constitution? These judges get to use the Constitution in their grievances at the state bar or the Judicial Commission. The Constitution says I can rule with discretion and have immunity. Okay, well, the Constitution also says I can make a criminal complaint when you violate me, and official oppression is in the penal code. And real quick, one of the stories I wanted to talk about, and I'll say it now because this is it's fitting for this Facebook Live. But here in Bexar County, I went to support one of my buddies that was going through court, and I went into Mary Lou Alvarez's court. And I remember I had a sprained ankle. I was on crutches, hobbled my ass all the way up into the courtroom. And I get there, and I was a little late. They hadn't gone on record yet. But when I walked in, Mary Lou Alvarez, the judge here in Bexar County, said, what's your name, and put your cell phone in the box with the bailiff. And I was like, whoa, hold up here, Judge. I said, my name is Joe Public, and you don't have a warrant for my personal devices. She says, okay, let me go on the record. She goes on the record and she says, sir, you in the back, what's your name, and give your cell phone to the bailiff. I said, ma'am, I am not giving my cell phone to the bailiff. She says, bailiff, please escort him out. A member of the public. I hadn't even done anything. My cell phone was off. I was just there for support. And this judge had removed me from a public hearing because she wanted to identify me and she wanted to take my cell phone.
Well,
and that's who, and that's flagrant. That's flagrant. SEJC didn't do anything. They just said nothing happened, as usual. She has immunity to do it. She went on the record so she could say that I wasn't following the decorum of the court. Again, decorum of the court doesn't allow them to just violate you. Nothing allows them, gives them the ability. So I made a video last night telling everybody, hey, don't be afraid of your judge. You should go into any courtroom just like you go into the church looking for Christ and you meet a priest. It's the same thing. You should go into these courts demanding justice, demanding that our tax-paying judges that work for the public honor the Constitution, honor the laws. And if you're going to oppress me, let's talk about it. Let's bring the whole community in here to talk about how you're oppressing people, because you ran for position. I didn't ask you to do it. I didn't tell you to do it. You went out there and actually paying to be on this bench so you could treat people with fairness.
Yeah. I know, George, I got to get going on to something else today. So we'll get together again soon and hopefully get a guest on.
Yeah.
Keep it going. So,
hey man, this was pretty good. Little
last
we had
minute
technical difficulties, but we really just
keep the conversation going. We're gonna try to do it every week. We gotta just keep doing it. So
yeah.
All right. Cool,
All right,
buddy.
buddy. Thanks for having me.
Good work. Thanks, everybody.